Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit. I am your host, Eric Dwinnells. Again, it's been a little while, but I'm happy to give you some good news. For those of you following my injury, you will know that I broke my ankle back in January. It's been a long road to recovery, and we're still not quite done yet. But the good news is I am officially back on 2 feet, walking on 2 feet without any braces or any crutches or anything like that. I'm finally able to get around my apartment. I'm probably 80% of the way back at it on my day job and everything else. So that's really good news. And what that means is that I can now finally start to clean my apartment, really, for the first time since January, which means I'll be having people over more often, which means more episodes with guests, and that kind of fun stuff. Another thing that kind of holds up the episodes is, I've had to do a few by myself for the current period. And sometimes I'll start taking notes on a subject or something, and then I'm just like, man, I don't want to do this one by myself. I really want someone else to be here. I think this will be a good one to do with somebody else, because I like to have that feeling of having an audience or someone that I'm sharing this information with and kind of going off their reactions. I've explained before that that's really kind of the function of the guest. It's not that they're experts most of the time. Once in a while. My Disney guy, of course, Aaron, he's, kind of an expert, and I've had a few other people that have actually known what they're talking about on the show. But for the most part, it's really just to give it kind of a flavor of two friends talking, and, one of them is kind of sharing these details, and then the guest is really kind of standing in for you guys, the rest of the audience, and hopefully saying things that you would say or asking questions that you would ask if you were here. So I hope that picks up, and it's not just me rambling at you guys all the time like it has been more or less lately. But even when it does come to that, I'm glad to say that most of you guys don't give up on me, and I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the support and the encouragement that I've been getting during this time. Also, I was very stressed out because I had to buy a new car. That was the big stress last weekend, but that is over finally. I'm very happy with my brand new Honda Civic. Nothing too fancy for your humble host, but just a good quality car. All right, then. This week we are going to be talking about, it does technically have a title, this kind of urban legend, I guess you would call it, but the title kind of gives away the punchline of the story, so I don't really want to say what the title is. I was inspired to share this with you because, again, when I'm having a hard time finding a subject, especially one that I feel comfortable covering by myself, I often turn to the books that I have on my bookshelf. And one of my favorite books of all time that I've had since I was a little kid, I believe it was my grandfather's, and I just picked it up and kept reading it and turning the pages. I was just really into this book the whole time. It's a Reader's Digest collection called Strange Stories, Amazing Facts. It's a big red book. You can find it on Amazon. But I never cease to find inspiration in there, and this is one of the little stories. It's less than half a page long in the book. So I'm going to share the story with you. I'm not going to be reading it directly from the book, but what I've done is I've taken kind of the essence of the story, and I've made my own story, my own version of the story from it. So I'm going to share it with you. The details are essentially the same as you would find in the book or in the legend of this story. Anywhere you read it, although I did add some names just to keep from having to say, and then the girl, and then the mom, and then so I did add a few names just to keep it interesting, but for the most part, this is essentially how the legend goes. So this is a little bit of a different episode. We're kind of back to story time with Creepy Uncle Eric. Let's say spooky. Creepy sounds like there's something inappropriate going on. There's nothing inappropriate going on. Spooky Uncle Eric? I don't know. You throw anything in front of Uncle, it doesn't sound good, I guess. Why not? I don't know. Just regular Spooky Eric. How about that? Okay, now, as I said, the name of this urban legend will give away the punchline to it. So, I am going to call this one The Mysterious Woman in Room 214. In 1889, Paris hosted the Expedition Universelle from May through October of that year. This was essentially a World's Fair where nations from around the globe were invited to create pavilions that would show off their national pride and accomplishments. So, kinda not unlike Epcot at Disney World. Kinda. There were many notable guests, including the Shah of Persia, the Prince of Wales, artist Vincent van Gogh, Nikola Tesla, and Thomas Edison. Attractions included a human zoo, including a, quote, Negro village. Yes, it was as offensive as it sounds. There was also Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, including the astounding sharpshooter, Annie Oakley. And operatic performances as well, making their grand premiere at the Exposition Universelle. These attractions drew packed crowds throughout the entire exposition. But perhaps the most famous icon of the fair was its entranceway, the just completed Eiffel Tower. The exposition was big business for the city of Paris. More than half the visitors at the exposition came from foreign lands. Hotels all around the city were booked up, and many visitors struggled to find a place to stay. Such was the case when 19-year-old Emma Hall and her mother Margaret arrived in Paris in late July. The Halls had been staying in India, but were bound to return home to England. The call of the Paris Exposition was too strong, however, and the Hall's curiosities were piqued by the wonders the exposition was said to hold. They decided to take a detour through Paris before returning to England. Being a spur-of-the-moment trip, the Halls had not booked a hotel in advance. Hotel after hotel was completely booked, but after nearly an hour of searching, they finally found one with a room to let. The desk clerk explained, in near-perfect English, which was good since neither of the Hall women spoke very much French, that there was a small room available, but they would have to share a bed. The mother and daughter didn't mind that at all. It was this or nothing. As they checked in, Margaret began to have a violent coughing fit. The desk clerk offered her some water, and then pointed out that there was a hotel doctor kept on staff. He said he'd be happy to send the doctor up to their room. Margaret waved off the offer. It was just a cough, she said, most likely caused by the change of climate between India and France. Very well, said the desk clerk. Here is the key to your room. It's number 214, just up the stairs and to the left. The Halls made their way to the room. The clerk wasn't lying. It was a small room, but it was comfortable enough, well appointed with maroon curtains and oak furnishings. The women put their bags down and began to unpack, when Emma suddenly turned to her mother and said, "Oh, Mother, I'm just too excited. It's still fairly early in the day. Why wait until tomorrow? Couldn't we go to the exposition today, even if just for a little while?" "Oh, dear, I don't know. It's just that I'm not feeling that well after all." But Margaret could see the disappointment on her daughter's face. It was a look that always broke her heart. Besides, she really did want to believe that she wasn't sick at all. She wanted to believe what she had told the desk clerk, that it was really just the change of air that had caused her sudden coughing fits. "Okay, we'll go to the fair, but only for a few hours, and then we shall come back and rest. It has been a long journey, and we're not home yet." And so the two freshened up and made their way back downstairs. As they passed the desk clerk, he called out to Mrs. Hall, "Madam, are you feeling better? Please don't forget, there is a doctor here who would be happy to see you." "Thank you for your concern, young man, but I assure you, I am as fit as a fiddle." And with that, the Halls made their way to the exposition. There they saw many great sights and wonders. They marveled at the newly built Eiffel Tower, and as they gazed upon the reconstruction of an Aztec temple in the Mexican pavilion, Emma noticed that her mother was shaking, shivering, and yet sweating. "Are you all right, Mother?" she asked. I'm afraid I don't feel very well after all, Margaret replied. My head hurts, and I am suddenly very cold. I think we'd better head back to the hotel. Emma became frightened now. Her mother had always been of a strong constitution. If she was complaining about feeling truly unwell, Emma knew that there was reason to be concerned. The two made it back to their hotel, and they were greeted by the desk clerk at the door. Back so soon, ladies? Did the exposition fail to impress you? As soon as he'd finished his question, Margaret's knees buckled, and she suddenly fell to the floor. Well, she would have fallen to the floor if Emma had not been holding her arm. My word, said the clerk. It is as I suspected from the start. You are sick, Mrs. Hall. I will help you to your room, and we shall send for the doctor. The clerk took Margaret by the arm and told the bellhop to go and bring the doctor to room 214. As the clerk and Emma were easing Margaret into the bed, the doctor appeared. He asked for privacy to examine the patient. The clerk suggested to Emma that she and him step out into the hallway, and they could have a little chat while the doctor examined the mother. Once in the hall, the clerk attempted to make small talk, asking Emma about her travels in India and her visit to the Exposition Universelle. Emma answered politely, but rather distractedly. Her thoughts were on her ailing mother. After some time, the doctor emerged from the room. He began to speak in French to the desk clerk, before suddenly stopping and looking at Emma for a moment. Emma noticed that he returned to speaking to the clerk, and he must have asked some kind of question, which caused the clerk to look at her and say, "No," in reply. The doctor carried on speaking, and the conversation between the two became more and more animated, though, of course, Emma had no clue what they were discussing. After some back and forth, the doctor turned to Emma and said, "Girl, I'm afraid your mother is sick. It's nothing too serious, but we'd better treat it here and now. She needs a certain medicine, but it's not something I keep here in the hotel. It is back at my office just outside of the city. Unfortunately, I do not feel it safe that I should go myself. I wouldn't want to leave your mother alone in her illness in case she takes a turn for the worse, so here's what we shall do. I will write you a note, and the hotel will provide a cab for you, and you will take this note to my partner, who will then fetch the medicine for you, and you can bring it back here to me." Emma protested, saying that she did not want to leave her mother, but the doctor interrupted her sharply, saying, "Listen to me, girl. This is the way it has to be. There is no other way. If you care for your mother, if you care for her at all, you will go this very instant." Taken aback by the doctor's stern tone, the girl and the desk clerk returned to the hotel lobby, where the clerk arranged a cab for Emma and sent her on her way. The doctor's words repeated themselves over and over in Emma's head. On the one hand, he had made it sound like whatever was causing her mother's illness wasn't too serious. On the other hand, he sure seemed in a hurry to send Emma on her way to fetch the medicine. And all the while Emma still felt uneasy about leaving her mother's side without so much as saying goodbye. To add to the poor luck of this day, thanks to the exposition, traffic was terrible all over the city and even beyond. The driver said that their journey to the doctor's office should only take about an hour or less, but with traffic, it took more than twice that long. Besides the traffic, there was a bit of a delay when the doctor's partner seemed very confused about the doctor's note. Eventually, he did as the note instructed and handed Emma a bottle of some kind of red liquid. Finally, they were back on their way to the hotel. As soon as Emma got out of the cab, the driver whipped the horses and took off like a shot. Emma noticed this and thought it odd, but she did not stop to ponder its meaning. She had more important business to attend to. She rushed in and saw the clerk at his desk. He gave a polite smile and nod, but said nothing as he watched Emma rush up the stairs to the second floor. When she reached room 214, she realized she did not have the key. She must have left it in the room during all the commotion. She knocked on the door and called for the doctor, but he did not answer. She knocked again, louder this time, and called for her mother. Again, there was no response. She tried the door several times, alternating between calling for the doctor and calling for her mother, but after several minutes with no response, she thought they must have gone somewhere else. Maybe to the doctor's quarters in the hotel, or perhaps even to the hospital. Either way, Emma thought, the desk clerk would know. He'd been so kind and attentive to both she and her mother. Emma returned to the lobby and approached the desk clerk, who greeted her, saying, "Hello again, Mademoiselle Hall. How are you? So lovely to see you. How may I be of service?" "I went to my room, but I didn't have the key," she said. "I knocked, but neither my mother nor the doctor answered. Would you please tell me where they have gone?" A strange, bewildered look came over the desk clerk's face. "Your mother, mademoiselle? I do not understand." Now it was Emma's turn to be bewildered. "Of course you do. My mother, she is sick. You helped her into bed yourself." "My apologies," the clerk responded. "But there seems to be some confusion here. I did show you to your room earlier, but you arrived alone. I never saw your mother. You checked in alone." "What is this?" Emma cried. "You know full well that my mother and I checked into room 214. 214, you say?" "No, mademoiselle, you are mistaken. You checked into room 225. Could that be it? Emma wondered. Had she simply mistaken what room she was in? Emma could have sworn that she was in room 214. She even distinctly remembered the clerk telling the bellhop to fetch the doctor to room 214. In any event, she didn't have the room key to 214 or 225, so she asked the clerk to allow her into room 225. He led the way up the stairs, and Emma glanced at room 214 as they passed. She didn't see how it was possible, but she hoped that she was wrong. She hoped she had simply forgotten the room number. But why was the clerk insisting that he had not seen Emma's mother? That was harder to explain away. Emma knew, she knew for absolute fact that not only had he seen her, but he had conversations with her and had helped put her to bed. As Emma pondered this, they reached the door to room 225. The clerk opened it, and to her shock, Emma saw her own luggage. All of it was there, and some of her personal items had been laid out just the way she had unpacked them. But there was no sign of her mother's luggage, or her mother, or the doctor. And there was something else, something trifling in the grand scheme of things, but something Emma couldn't help but notice. She distinctly remembered maroon curtains and oak furnishings. The furnishings looked the same, but the curtains were a deep green. "This is not right," Emma exclaimed. "These are my things, but this is not my room. Why are you playing this game with me when my mother is sick?" The desk clerk attempted to protest, but Emma cut him off, saying, "You will let me into room 214 right now, or I will kick down the door myself." The desk clerk began to explain that there was another guest booked into room 214, and although he was out at the exposition, it still would not be right to invade his personal privacy. As he said all this, Emma ran down the hall back to room 214. She began to kick and throw her shoulder against the door. The desk clerk ran after her and, seeing her determination, agreed to open the door. But only for a quick look inside, he insisted. When he opened the door, Emma was startled to see once again that nothing fit her memory. There was indeed luggage in the room, but it was not hers nor her mother's. The maroon curtains were gone, replaced with royal blue ones. The fine oak bed frame was gone, and in its place a cheaper pine frame. "What is all this? How can it be? What is going on here? You know my mother was with me. You readied the cab that took me to get her medicine. This medicine, right here, right in my hand. Why would I have this medicine if it was not for my sick mother?" The clerk took the bottle from Emma and looked it over before saying, "I'm not sure what this is for, or where you got it." At these words, Emma flew into a rage. She knew she was right. She knew she was not crazy, and yet this man insisted on trying to make her feel crazy. She flew at the desk clerk with her arms raised. She managed to clasp her hands around his neck, choking him in a true fit of madness. Oh, yes. If he wanted to act like she was crazy, she would show him just how crazy she could be. The clerk was bigger and stronger than Emma, and he was able to escape her grasp. But even after he threw her off, she rushed him once again and began thrashing and scratching him. The clerk called for help, and someone ran and got the police. While waiting for them to arrive, the desk clerk and several other men who had sprung to his assistance, having seen the bedeviled woman attack him, attempted to restrain Emma. When the police arrived, they were hesitant to restrain Emma themselves. She was just a young lady, after all. But once they saw the fury with which she attempted to free herself from the grasp of the 4 men holding her down, they forced her to the ground and cuffed her like a common criminal. As they led her out of the hotel, Emma saw the doctor walking through the lobby. She saw him look in her direction and then quickly look away. She called to him, "Doctor, where is my mother? Is she all right? I got the medicine." But the doctor quickened his steps and was soon out of sight. Emma screamed in frustration and fear. It was an almost inhuman, primal kind of scream, the likes of which all who heard would never forget. Emma was taken away by the police. They questioned the hotel staff, all of whom insisted that Emma Hall had checked in alone. The courts determined that Emma had gone insane for reasons unknown. What happened to Emma after this is unknown, though it is said she was eventually returned to England, where she spent the rest of her life in a madhouse. The end. Okay, so that's my personal version of the story for you. That is based on what they are referring to as an urban legend, normally called the Vanishing Hotel Room. There was a movie that was loosely based on this idea. I believe it was called Long at the Fair, or perhaps So Long at the Fair. I have not seen the movie myself. I only just recently learned about it. It is from back in the day. And I, as I mentioned, first became aware of this story through the Reader's Digest book, Strange Stories, Amazing Facts, which I highly recommend. Now, this is essentially an urban legend. There's no proof to back up that any of it happened. But again, the basic details are the woman checks into a hotel with her mother. The mother is sick. A doctor comes, and they send the girl away. And then when the girl comes back, everyone says that the girl never checked in with her mother. That is the basic story. That is the legend. That is the Vanishing Hotel Room, because when she checks the hotel room, it's not the same as when she left. That's where there's some variations. But essentially, the hotel room has changed in some way, shape, or form. Her stuff is not where it's supposed to be, that kind of thing. That's the basic legend that you can kind of riff around. In fact, if any of you out there remember the TV show Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction, there was an episode where they did a story on this, but they set it in modern times, which is kind of weird. I guess maybe it was a budget thing. It's harder to do period pieces, I guess. But it seems like this would be real easy to debunk in modern times. But anyway, it is, like I said, just a legend. There's no proof of any of this, although it is slightly curious that it's always set at the specific exposition of 1889 in Paris, France. And let's go ahead and pretend that this is a true story, or that it's got at least some basis in truth, or at least try to figure out if this is an urban legend, what fears is it playing on, because that is normally what urban legends do. They find some kind of fear to exploit, and they're kind of a warning like, yes, this is why you shouldn't do this kind of thing, or why you need to be careful when you do such and such. So let's get these kind of paranormal ideas out of the way. First of all, there are some who would say that this is a good example of someone somehow traveling between dimensions, parallel dimensions. Now, if you're familiar with the multiverse theory, um, there's we've talked about this before in our Shadow People episode and probably some other episodes too. But basically, multiverse theory is multifaceted, and there's lots of different theories around a proposed multiverse. But one of them is that there are infinite numbers of parallel universes, where in some of them there's only a slight change. They'd basically be the exact same as ours, except like instead of wiggling my big toe, I wiggled my pinky toe at this very moment. That's the only difference. The whole rest of history is exactly the same because there's an infinite number. So there's some where that's the only difference, and then there's some where there's major differences. Like I took a left instead of a right coming off the highway today, and I got in a big accident. That didn't happen in my universe, but maybe in a parallel universe it did. So all kinds of things. Again, an infinite number of possibilities. So if that's the case, perhaps she slipped into a parallel universe where she really did check in by herself and her mother was never there. That's, one of the paranormal theories. Another one is that perhaps this was some kind of time slip, a little glitch in the matrix. And I don't really know how this theory fits together because it still seems like either the mother has to be involved or not be involved, and I don't see how a time slip would necessarily make that happen. I would see that more if they came and said, oh yeah, your mother did check in, but that was 4 years ago, or something like that. But there's no explanation like that given in any versions of the legend that I have seen. So let's talk about what this story is probably really representing, which is two things, in my opinion. One is fear of the plague and foreign travel. You'll notice in the beginning of the story, the legend, they mentioned that the family had traveled to India and had been living in India, which of course at the time was a British colony. And there was the plague going around during this time in India, and all kinds of other illnesses too, right? So when the mother and daughter arrive in Paris, the doctor is able to see that this woman has the plague, and of course the desk clerk is able to say, hey, they just came back from India. Remember, they were having a conversation in French, right? So this is probably what was going on. He said, this woman's been to India and she probably has the plague. And the doctor's like, well, we can't let the daughter back in there. This woman's got to be quarantined because we don't want to get anybody else sick. And the hotel basically doesn't want to lose business during their very busy season. They don't want rumors going around that there's someone with the plague in their hotel. So this is a kind of a cover-up theory. So they decide they are going to get rid of the daughter by sending her on an errand that they know will take forever, which is to go across town, give this note to the partner, blah, blah, blah. And in the meantime, while she's out, they are frantically dealing with the mother. Now, what does that mean? I can't imagine a scenario where it doesn't mean that she, at the very least, gets sent away to some sick hospital that goes undocumented and unreported. More likely, they murder her, in my opinion, because she does have the plague. The doctor probably knows this is not going to end well for her. He probably considers it more of a mercy killing. I don't think it was for the pure fun of it. And so then they just have to deal with the body after that. It's a legend, so there's no proof of what they might have done, but you can speculate on that all you like. And then that also explains the reason why the bed and perhaps even the curtains would be changed, because they don't want to contaminate the room. I'm not positive. I know if it wasn't at this time, it wasn't too long after or too long before when germ theory came around. I should Google that before I go on talking about it, but guess what? I'm not going to. I'll Google it after the fact, and you should too. But I don't know if that would have been, if they would have considered the bed to be catching, or perhaps the curtains because they're made out of fabric. Or maybe the curtains were moved just to kind of mess with the daughter and make her, even more think that she's going crazy. So that's really the cover-up theory, is that the doctor doesn't want the plague spreading. The hotel doesn't want rumors of the plague in the hotel, and for them to have their business interrupted with such nasty rumors during this big boon in the city, being the Exposition Universelle with your Eiffel Tower and all that. I think it also says something about our fear of foreign lands and foreign people, that they would be willing to sacrifice a visitor for the good of their own country in a way. Also, perhaps it's saying something about business, that businesses will put the business before people. So it's not about getting care for the person who's sick. It's about keep making sure business isn't affected by all of this. So I think all those things kind of factor into it, and you mix that up and you get a lasting urban legend that's been around for quite some time, known as the Vanishing Hotel Room. I remember reading that story when in that book, Strange Things, Amazing Facts. Strange Stories, Amazing Facts. Oh, now I'm blanking on. I said it earlier correctly. Whatever I said earlier was right. Strange Stories, Amazing Facts. I think that's right. But anyway, I read that when I was a kid, and I was fascinated by that story, even though it's only kind of slightly spooky. But I don't know, maybe because I was a mama's boy, and I was just, when I read that and I was little, and I was like, oh, that'd be terrible if you lost your mom and whatever. But let me know what you guys think about that story and what you think about this format in general. I know I've done stories a few times, and this one isn't, maybe not as well produced, no sound effects and stuff like that. There actually is a technical reason for why I'm not able to put those in at the moment, but I won't bother explaining all that. Just know that I am aware that it would be cooler if I had sound effects and little music cues and stuff like that. It's not a possibility at this time. But please do write in to spookyassshit@gmail.com and let me know what you thought about today's episode. And of course, if you have any other show ideas or suggestions or things you'd like me to talk about or people you'd like to try to get me to talk to, go ahead and write in at spookyassshit@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to hear those ideas. While I'm talking about things, of course, I want to plug the website, spookyassshit.com or spookyas.com. They both take you to the show. Yeah, I do this all the time. You'd think I could get it out word perfect now. I usually do. Let me try that again. They both take you to the same place, and that is the show's blog page. From there, you can listen to each and every episode of Spooky Ass Shit. You can find pictures and outtakes and YouTube videos connected with certain episodes. You can also find links to our social media accounts. We are at Spooky Ass Shit on Instagram, as well as the old Twitter. And you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/spookyas. And I'm really not very good with Twitter. I'm kind of okay with Instagram. But Facebook is really where, if you want the latest on the show, if you want kind of behind the scenes, what's going on, why sometimes it takes a little while to get an episode out, that is where you want to check in with Facebook. So please go ahead, like us over there. Again, our numbers don't really match the listeners that we get, especially anyone who's got Libsyn podcast accounts, you'll know they changed the way that they give you your stats and everything. So it's kind of hard to keep track of what's going on here. But I know that we have a good number of listeners, but our social media doesn't really reflect it. So I would love to see those numbers get a boost, especially on Instagram and Facebook. Twitter, I'm just really not good at Twitter. I feel like I should hold the domain, the handle there, just so that I have it, and so that someone else doesn't come along and try to make some spoof tweets or something for some reason. But even in my personal Twitter, I've never really used it. I hardly ever use it for the show. But the Instagram, I do try to post some fun pictures up there, and of course Facebook, as I said, I really enjoy, because that way I get to look at you guys too and see what you guys are about, what you're up to. Not in a stalkery kind of way, but I do take a quick look sometimes when I get a new like, and I'll say, okay, what's this person into? What might they enjoy for the show? And of course, you can reach out to me there. We can message back and forth and pretend like we know each other. And yeah, so that reminds me, I've been having some nice conversations about the Golden State Killer, which is a case that I have been into for many, many years now. And of course, as I said before on a previous episode, they have a suspect. He is going to court soon. He's been in and out of court already, but very, very exciting times as far as that case goes. And it's nice to be able to have people on Facebook to talk to, because no one in my personal life is really into the case the way that I am. Only a handful of people that I know I've mentioned it to even know what I'm talking about. And they're like, oh yeah, I've heard of it, but they're not like following it. So that's another reason why I'm very happy to talk to you guys via Facebook or via email, because I know that some of you are weirdos like me who follow this stuff. And I was so excited when that news came out that they had a suspect in custody. That seemed like something that might never happen. And I was just glad to finally be able to have people to kind of process it with, I guess, because I didn't have anyone. And it's not, if people don't understand, they don't understand, you know. If it's something you've been following for a while and it seemed like this thing that might be solvable, but you don't really have those high hopes for it, but then suddenly it is, like out of the blue. It's like someone who wasn't even named as a suspect before, someone who wasn't even looked at. It's crazy. So again, that's a really good example of what kind of connections we can have and conversations we can have. Please, if you enjoy the show, subscribe, rate, and review via Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, even YouTube. However you end up hearing the show, please, if there's a way to rate and review, go ahead and do that. And please don't forget to share the show with anyone who you think might enjoy it. Even if you think there's just an off chance. Point out to them, you know, like, hey, this is a paranormal show, but it doesn't take itself super seriously. The host isn't like super convinced about ghosts and all that kind of stuff, but he just likes talking about it, and he treats it kind of lighthearted. That's kind of the angle we want to go for here, that we're kind of a fun show about the paranormal, as opposed to we're all doomed, they're coming to get us, and that kind of stuff. So I think I've rambled on at the end here enough. With all that said, have a wonderful weekend or week or day or whatever you happen to be having at the moment. And until next time, don't be afraid.